Good afternoon. I'm Deborah Jackson, the founder and CEO of Plum Alley, and I am absolutely delighted to moderate this panel because we have some real rock stars here. This panel is about women entrepreneurs, and I just want to put this all into perspective by giving you just a few pieces of information so you can appreciate the status of women entrepreneurs today. So there's been quite a lot of press about women entrepreneurs, and American Express came out with a new study looking last year at 2016 and determined that 41% of all the new companies that are being founded by women entrepreneurs. So this is not a small market, this is not a sub-market, this is actually a major part of the early stage ecosystem. And in 2017, it is predicted that every single day there will be approximately 1,000 women founding companies. So that equals 360,000 new companies in this year alone. And that's huge. It's a big part of our economy. And when you think about it, all these great women entrepreneurs that are founding companies, they need capital. They're not going to make it if they don't get sufficient capital. So when you think about how much money is being deployed by venture capital firms, and that's the main source of capital for early stage companies, last year, $67 billion was allocated to early stage companies. And that amount was deployed by roughly 2,000 firms. And in the top 10 firms, roughly 60 venture partners allocated $17 billion. So when you think about that, massive amounts of money being deployed by a small, relatively small handful of people. And we know the numbers say that roughly 7% of those venture dollars were allocated to women-founded companies. And there are roughly 7% of venture partners that are women. So when you think about it, all these great companies need capital. We need to balance out this ecosystem. And the good news is there are some amazing women who are doing that. So we have 3 founders here, all of whom have started very impressive companies, have really been in an elite group that have raised significant venture capital. And I'd like for each one of them to talk about their company, number one, why they started their company, how it was to raise money, and how that money is really fuel in the engine for them to be successful. So we'll start first with Haley Barna, who is the founder, one of the 2 founders of Birchbox, and we'll hear her perspective and then we'll go down the line.
Hi everyone, so I'm Haley Barna. I'm here in 2 capacities, one as a co-founder of Birchbox, and then in my current role, a venture partner at First Round Capital based in New York. So Birchbox was a concept that I came up with my co-founder actually when we were business school students at HBS. And Birchbox is a beauty retailer. So we focus on making it both efficient and fun to find the right products for you. And we do so with an innovative try, learn, buy business model. So subscription, where you get a personalized set of samples sent to you, where you can learn about those samples through content and video. And then we also sell the full-size versions. So when you find a product you love, you can easily click to buy them. So this was just an idea we had when we were 2 students. Honestly, we were inspired by our needs as consumers. Personally, I wasn't spending money in the high-end beauty space. My mom was a hippie and I grew up as a tomboy, and I found it actually pretty intimidating to walk into a department store or to Sephora and look at thousands of options and know which product I should buy, so I was just sort of opting out. But at the same time, I loved buying other products, especially online, so apparel and media. So we sort of served that gap, that it was a cluttered market, hard to find the right products for you, and there was no real solution for how you buy beauty online, especially because it's a tactile category where you kind of want to touch, try, and feel something before you spend money on it. So it was our personal needs and our experience as consumers that inspired us to start the business.
So how much money did you raise, and how was that?
So at first, we just wanted to figure out if it would work. No one had ever charged consumers for samples. We were outsiders to the beauty industry. So we bootstrapped while we were still students with our own savings, spending less than $10,000 to do a proof of concept. And that helped us gain confidence that, oh, we're onto something, this could work. From there, we decided that we would raise a seed round, and that was definitely the hardest funding round for us. We had great data from the proof of concept. We thought we had a really solid business plan, but we were pitching to a lot of people that didn't understand the market, frankly, a lot of men who just wouldn't touch the products, needed to ask their secretaries or their wives what they thought. And it was tough. So we were pounding the pavement, hearing a lot of maybes, which is actually worse than a lot of no's, because it means that you're spending a lot of time in conversations when you should be launching the business. But ultimately, we raised a bit of money from friends and family. That got us to a full launch, which gave us the momentum and traction that enabled us to raise our seed round. First Round Capital, where I now work, was the lead investor in our seed round. And from there, it was really immediate product market fit. Since that time, so 7 years ago, we've raised over $80 million. So through our Series B. Yes. Woohoo, for sure. And to give you a sense of the scale of the business, we have over 1 million subscribers. We're in 6 countries. So we operate in Europe. We have a store down in Soho that you should all check out. And we have over 150 employees full-time.
Great. Okay. So next rock star. Shan, sorry, I apologize about that, has a company, Zola. So tell us why you founded the company, how much money you've raised, and what that money is allowing you to do.
For those of you who don't know Zola, we are the fastest growing wedding registry and one of the fastest growing e-commerce companies in the country. So specifically, the way we're different is that we let engaged couples who are getting married today register online for the things that they truly want in a way that reflects who they really are on any device. Now, the idea was really born out of 2013, which was the year that we started Zola. We were thinking about, my co-founder and I were thinking about what would be an idea that we could commit our next 7 to 10 years of our life on. And the average age of a startup is 7 to 10 years. So we knew if we were going to pick something, we should really want to do it. At that same time, that was when all my friends were getting married at the same time. And I had to buy from a lot of really bad wedding registries. And I hated buying from these e-commerce stores online. And when I asked my friends about it, they similarly hated the experience of registering with these stores. So my co-founder and I had worked in e-commerce together for a long time at Gilt Group, and that was when the light bulb went off. We thought we can do a much better job, and our friends are the ones who would be the users. We understand the audience and what is needed. Why isn't there anything else out there like this? So we set out to create the best wedding registry around, and that's what we've been focused on over the last 3.5 years since we launched. In that time, just under 4 years since we started the business, we've raised over 40 million in VC funding, and what that has gone into is growing the team in what we aim to describe as a thoughtful, slow and steady growth on the people side, while trying to accelerate the business and the growth on the business side as quickly as possible. Because of that, we had a great Series C round at the end of last year, valuing our company in the top quartile of all Series C valuations within the country over that year. And I think it's really a reflection of that markets that target end users who are primarily female, like the weddings market, is not as small as you might think, just because you're not the target user. Going forward, we're investing that fund into growing the business faster to address new needs that this same millennial engaged couple needs and wants when they think about that life stage from the day they get engaged through their first year of marriage.
Very good. All right, so Catherine, who is the founder of Maven Clinic, Catherine Ryder, tell us about why you started your company and your quest to raise money and how that's worked out and how you're growing.
So for those of you who don't know Maven, we are the first digital clinic for women. So what that means is you can go onto our site and you can book an appointment with a doctor, a nurse practitioner, a mental health provider, a nutritionist, you can get prescriptions, and you can do it all virtually. So we're in a market called telemedicine. I started the business 3 years ago. Well, I started thinking about the business 3 years ago. I was working in venture capital. I was covering a lot of digital health investments, and it was right around the time when digital health as a market was really starting to attract a lot of capital and to, attract a lot of great talent, starting businesses. And right around that time, a lot of my friends started having kids. And so one of the things that was just so obvious about digital health, to echo Shan's point about, huge underserved female markets, is that digital health was a predominantly female market. Women control 80% of healthcare decisions, and when you look at, millennials, females outspend men by 70%. And so here, all of my friends were starting to have kids, and then I actually had a baby 9 months ago, so I've now gone through it myself. And there were just a lot of companies coming across my desk, but none of them were targeting the female customer. So one of the first things I thought was, okay, here's a great and much needed business, and something that I also could marry the next 10 years of my life to. So one of the first things I did was to just start talking to a lot of women's and family health providers, talking to a lot of female patients, and there was just such passion as well in terms of really bringing better care to women, whether it's birth control access or breastfeeding support for new moms. So when we launched to the consumer market 2 years ago, April 2015, we had raised a little over $2 million of seed funding to do that. And healthcare is a little bit of a different industry than a lot of others because there is so much regulation, and you really do have to invest in building out the right infrastructure so that as you eventually, move towards the B2B revenue, and just to borrow my friend's line in terms of what makes great healthcare businesses, you need consumer quality products. You need to kind of play around in the consumer market for a bit, but then you need enterprise grade revenue. So we're now, selling into companies, and we're selling, we have B2B revenue coming into the business. And so, so we raised $2 million to really build out that infrastructure to get to market and to really understand how our customers were interacting with our product. We're very much, it's a user behavior change in the sense that a lot of people have never done video medicine before, they've never gotten a prescription from a doctor online, so we also needed to just understand how people were reacting to it. And so then once we started to see our marketplace take off on the consumer side, and we started to talk to companies just asking, okay, what are some of the pain points that we can solve for you with a network of women's and family health providers? And so what we really heard is that maternity and postpartum is typically the #1 healthcare cost for a lot of Fortune 100. So just to give you an idea, with Google, Google maternity is their top healthcare spend by 3x any other healthcare spend. So it could be 7 to 12% of a healthcare budget. And so what all of these companies were saying is, we really don't have any options to give our employees when it comes to great products in maternity care, which I think, you can look at the offline market too and make the same case. And so what we did is leveraged our telemedicine network and built built an entire maternity management program. It's 15 months, 9 months of pregnancy, 6 months of postpartum, and we started to sell that into companies. But before we could do that, we needed to raise a little bit more money because, again, there was that whole nationalization build out, and then there was the whole kind of, you know, going through security compliance with corporates and getting our first customers and going through those early long sales cycles, which is, you know, when you're first selling into B2B healthcare, you know, what you have to go through. So we raised a little over $3 million to do that, and then we're just finally closing our a big round of funding to scale our maternity products. So that has been our story so far.
Excellent. So Alex is one of the key people at Techstars, and why don't you give us your comments, first of all, about what Techstars does, if anybody doesn't know, but also, what do you think about these 3 fabulous founders, and how does that fit in with the kinds of founders you see coming to Techstars?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So, a bit about me, I'm a father of 3 daughters, so I'm deeply passionate about female entrepreneurship. I hope my daughters are gonna grow up and gonna start companies. So for those of you who don't know Techstars, it's a global ecosystem that helps founders create companies around the world. So to date, we funded a little bit over 1,000 companies, of which I've invested in about 70 through the New York program, which I've been running for the past 3.5 years. And among the founders that I was fortunate to work with are actually two teams from Columbia Entrepreneurship, Flip and Salo, and they're doing awesome, both companies. We've also invested in Impact Health, Purple, Gloss Genius, Jewel Bots, and a whole bunch of other really talented female founders. What I think about these female founders, I think they're amazing, obviously, is what I think. And you know,
He's getting his checkbook out right now.
Well, I don't think they need our checkbook. It's now too small for where they are. But you know, I think it's an important issue, and it's very complicated, and we're sort of facing it daily, and there's no sort of simple answer. But I'm glad that we have a panel, and you know, I enjoy every opportunity to sort of discuss the issue.
Great. So one of the things that occurs to me is all 3 of these founders, and we didn't pick them this way, but all 3 of these founders understood a product and are in a market that's primarily for women. And you know, maybe that's part of the reason that female founders don't always get their fair share of funding, because the products they're creating aren't always understood by other people. And just, you know, when I think about innovation, and all 3 of your companies have innovation. If it's not innovation about the product, it's innovation about the delivery system, it's innovation about the technology that you're using, it's innovation about your corporate culture and management team. So it just makes sense that women have a lot to bring to the table, and especially in products that women will buy, and women do control the spending for their families, and in every category, in healthcare and education, travel, electronics. So what do you think, how did you come up with your innovation? How did you say, look, it's being done this way, we can do it this way, and how did you think about technology? Because one of the things that we know is you don't have to be an engineer or a coder to have a company that uses technology as a key component of what you're doing. You wanna?
Yeah, so I think that maybe to oversimplify a bit, I think founders fall into roughly 2 buckets, either missionary or mercenary. And on the missionary side, founders are starting a business because they're really passionate about making a change in the world, or they see a gap and they just need to fill it. And I personally, that's the bucket I fall into. On the mercenary side, it's more the types of founders, and perhaps you have classmates that fall into this category, where they've got a spreadsheet of 100 different business ideas and they're just systematically working through it, trying to figure out which one will make them the most money. And that can work too. But now as an investor, I also love to ask founders why. Like, starting a business is really hard. Why are you doing this crazy thing? And I just love when I hear the answer of a personal experience or a unique insight that they have based on whether it's their backgrounds, personally or professionally, and there's just a real vision and mission behind what they're doing. That said, you also need to make sure that there's some real tech and defensibility behind what you do. And with Birchbox, for us, it came from a few different areas. First is the fact that there's real network effects or defensibility that comes from scale from the data that we're collecting. So the more subscribers that we have, the better we're able to match the beauty samples that we send out to those subscribers. And we also gather a ton of data on what every subscriber thinks in terms of, did they like that product, did they not, did they click on it on the website, and all of that enables us to improve what samples we send to our customers next time. So while I didn't have a background as an engineer, I did have a background in consulting, and I knew the power of data and personalization, both to consumer experience and then also to the brands that we work with. Because we're a two-sided platform, we couldn't just get consumers on board, we needed to convince the beauty industry to change. And a big reason they were excited about doing the crazy thing of working with Birchbox is because of the insights and the data that we were collecting, and the fact that we could measure the return on investment from their marketing spend that came from this personalization and the feedback loop of seeing what happens once someone experiences a product.
Excellent. So, Catherine, for Maven, tell us a little bit about healthcare. I mean, healthcare is a very complicated industry, highly regulated, not always delivers good healthcare. What kind of metrics do you have when you think about your company and your product and your service?
Yeah, so what's really exciting is as we've taken kind of a condition management approach and selling it into corporates, we actually are starting to build a huge database on data around, patient-provider satisfaction, what providers have high C-section rates, how to case manage high-risk pregnancies so that you can reduce costs. We track postpartum anxiety because I think that's a public health issue that nobody really talks about is, what happens in that time period between a woman having a baby and returning to work, because we actually only have about a 60% retention rate of new moms in America, which is much lower than developed nations. And so, no one's even looked at that really as a public health issue. So we're building a database around, a lot of those metrics as well. And then through a lot of our partner integrations, and this is where healthcare actually gets really complicated because there's so many middlemen in so much of healthcare that you have to work with, we're now starting to get access to claims data so that we can really get a lot of interesting ROI data on how telehealth specifically can affect outcomes. And then in general, so that's our maternity management program. But then today the other big thing is there's just major access issues in women's health, and so that's why we always have our marketplace. We have over 1,000 providers at this point on our marketplace where you can download the app today. Here's a little, I'm going to hawk my product for a second, but Maven Clinic in the App Store or mavenclinic.com on the website. You can book an appointment. Anyone has a secret UTI right now, we can get you a prescription in a pharmacy in the next 30 minutes. For women in rural America that actually generally don't even have a healthcare provider close to them, for new moms who need a lactation consultant and the closest lactation consultant is 300 miles away, we can always match them. And so from that perspective, it's just providing great people with high user scores and high satisfaction from patients, because we rate, all of our providers are rated after every appointment to people that need it. And it's interesting because when I started, it was also kind of mission driven. It was, I had some access issues, some women's health issues that we don't need to go into right now by the time I was 30. And I had also had the stories of my friends. But as we've gotten deeper into the market, I mean, women's health, I think if it's even possible, I've become even more mission-driven because women's health is seriously in the shadows. There are so many issues that carry so much stigma, whether it's miscarriage or getting mental health support around abortion. There's 6.7 million pregnancies per year in the US, but only 4 million births. So what happens to those 2.7 million women, just from a wellness and holistic standpoint? And so as we've really started to hear the stories of our patients, I think my entire team is just so, and we have a, Planned Parenthood now potentially is getting defunded, which, politics aside, that they provide a lot of important women's health care. It's just, I think we have a very invigorated sense of mission to make this work.
Sometimes you have to have that mission or you wouldn't get up in the morning because it's so hard, right? On Zola, so how do you think about exit? So you said like 7 years kind of fits into your personal timeline. How do you plan to drive an exit or a return for your investors?
So the thing that I think about every morning and every night is not so much about an exit, but how do I build Zola into the biggest business possible? And if I am able to do that, that works out well for everyone, employees, customers, investors. And as a side note, one of the things that helps get me going whenever I'm feeling a bit run down or exhausted, the reason I get up again is I remember back to when we were first fundraising in the early days, before we had a lot of data, before we had a lot of proof points. There was certainly a fair share of VCs who would say to me, we don't invest in weddings. Is there even that much money in weddings? Do people even spend that much on a wedding gift? And in fact, they spend $19 billion a year in the US alone on wedding gifts, on wedding registry gifts. But having those people question, could this ever be a big business, has actually turned out to be one of the most motivating things when you're tired, not just to do it for the team and for the customers, but to actually prove people wrong, because that assumption is just a bad one. And so now more than ever, I would love to build something so big that that kind of question is not asked of female founders any longer.
And the female marketplace, and women as consumers, very, very big market. So Alex.
Sorry, I just want to add, because you would think that if a woman's starting a business where women's the customer, that it would give more credibility, but I actually experienced some of the same thing around the beauty industry when we were pitching. Sometimes I thought that all investors heard was that we loved lip gloss. I'm like, no, look at the graph. It's going up and to the right, and the margins are great. This isn't about my personal love of a beauty product. And that like a guy could have pitched the same thing and they would have paid more attention to the graph. So I think there is sometimes a mismatch that it's not like extra credibility because you're the customer, it's almost a discount, and I hope that changes as well.
Yeah, it's like a passion project and not cold hard business opportunity.
I always think about Dollar Shave Club, and I think if you had a group of women, if we were all venture capitalists and we were listening to some men come in and talk about shaving, and would we think that was a big business? Or would we care? So it's not, and I don't mean to be negative about men, I think they're amazing, but they have, just like there was one time, I'm a pretty active early stage investor, and I had an opportunity to invest in a football mobile app. And it was amazing, went on to make a lot of money, and I looked at it, and honestly, I thought, amazing business, but I don't really care about that, and I'm not sure I really even understand it or would use it. So that was, for me personally, when that light bulb went off, it's like, oh, yeah, it makes sense. If you don't understand the entrepreneur, you don't want the product, you don't really get the market, it's very hard to write that check.
I think that's fair. It's not like the investors are bad people.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
it's
I
just
don't know
human.
about that.
It's, now that I am an investor, that's what I tell myself. We're not evil. But that it is sort of human nature, and especially in the early stage, you do bring your anecdotal personal experience to bear when you're evaluating something. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so Alex, question for you. You see a lot of companies, a lot of founding teams. Talk about gender diverse founding teams. Do you see anything there versus all male teams, all female teams, and what does the combination of men and women do for a company?
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt in my mind that diverse teams do better probabilistically over long periods of time. So since I'm a math major, it's going to sound weird, but if we took like 1,000 companies that were, made out of diverse teams versus 1,000 companies made out of non-diverse teams, I think that the 1,000 that are made out of diverse teams would outperform them. The problem with all of this is, on an individual basis, everything is unpredictable. That's what's wonderful about our lives. There's no way to tell. And to echo the point of like people making completely wrong calls on things, if you read one of the latest tech books that came out, people were telling Uber and B&B that these are small companies. Now everybody's like, clap, 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 these are the biggest companies, I told you so. So in retrospect, everything is obvious, but from my personal experience, we've had some super strong female founders teams, and I personally think that one of the best classes, if not the best one that we've had, was incredibly diverse. So it's not just one company, but even the 14 or 15 companies that went through the program. The more diversity, the better stickiness, sort of collaboration, and ultimately the end result. So, it's pretty obvious. The harder question is, what do we do about it? Like that's there's no shortcut. That's the problem. The problem is we can't just like get into the universe where this problem is fixed. We need to do the work. So I feel like this panel is part of us doing the work.
Yes, and I think there are some organizations and people that are very committed to opening up the access and making it a better playing field. It's part of what my company does. We get money to women entrepreneurs and gender diverse teams, but also engage a new base of investors, because everyone should have access to invest in these companies, and not just venture capital firms. And there are, for wealth creation, to have a voice about innovation and what's being created and our future. So for many, many reasons, we need to, broaden access is the way I think about it. So we're probably running close to the end here, but I would love to hear from each one of you. What is the thing that you say an entrepreneur has to have to be successful in your experience? Is it commitment? Is it knowledge of the product? Is it being a little crazy? Is it money? Or maybe all of those. So just, and also words of advice. What would you tell the budding entrepreneurs in this room?
So I think great founders come in lots of shapes and sizes, so I wouldn't want to typecast too much. But I think one thing now that I have to evaluate ideas and evaluate founders that I love to see is, again, just like that perfect fit between the founder and the idea. So like a reason why they are the human being to make it work. In terms of advice, I think, first of all, be comfortable making mistakes, admit when you don't know an answer, which also means it's okay to ask for help. And I think that it's great that there's communities like this, whether it's around universities or with Techstars, where founders can meet with peers and be open, sharing what's hard and also sharing what works, because I think we can all lift each other up in the process.
two things I try to cultivate and that I've observed of other founders is, one is endurance and the other is self-awareness. And actually I have a funny story about Haley on endurance.
Oh, good.
She doesn't remember this, but the first time we met was when I was lucky enough to invite her to breakfast, and she agreed. And at that point, Birchbox was already wildly successful. Zola was just starting. So in my mind, I thought, she must not have to worry about her business any longer. She could work less. It must be stress-free because it's doing so well. And we met for breakfast, I think, at 7:30 or 8. You had already been to the gym that morning. Then you met for breakfast at 8, and then you had meetings all day, all through the night, and you were clearly carving out a precious time of day to meet with me. And I thought, wow, you've been doing that for years, and it just never stops. And that's why I reflected upon it after, that's why that company was so successful. And the other thing is self-awareness. So I think when we had breakfast, again, I was thinking, you must already know everything because Birchbox is so great, but you were able to reflect on the things you had learnt, that you still had to learn, things that you were thinking through, and I think that is something that makes sure you never fall into pitfalls or have blind spots that have the potential to take down your entire business.
So, I definitely echo that persistence and endurance. I think there's always, one week you have all of these opening doors and everything's going great, and the next week, whether there's a competitor or something happens, you're like, oh my God. So you just have to always ride the waves and know what you're focused on and where you're gonna go, and always keep your eye on the kind of 3 to 5 year vision. And I think one of the things that's really helpful, not only to meet other entrepreneurs, is actually to read the stories of entrepreneurs. So I actually recently read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. That is an amazing book. So just constantly also immersing yourself in those stories, because there's no playbook for a lot of this. Just kind of sentiment and pushing forward. You definitely have to be a little insane, so that's number 2. And then 3, I think, is just also surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you and have experience or a skill set that you don't have, and whether they're on your team or whether they're your mentors. I'm really lucky to have a father who's an entrepreneur, so particularly that first year, every week I was on the phone with him for early management advice. And I think as a manager too, one of my investors told me management is an art, and you're going to be really bad at it for the first 3 years, and you have to know that you're going to be really bad at it, and just keep asking questions about when you encounter situations, so you can always keep your team motivated, because you can never do this without an amazing team. It's the company is a lot of people working towards one goal. So yeah, those are my 3 things.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you said. I mean, to me, this quality that great founders have is the sort of, they know the true north, but they're not super fixed about the path. And it's sort of like startup is a meditation. It's a self-inquiry. It's an inquiry about how we're going to get there. And it sort of folds in like intellectual honesty, focus on the sort of like the long term, but also being flexible and self-aware. And then my advice to you is please do it. Become entrepreneurs, right? Like if you're young and you're full of passion and ideas, and you can stomach entrepreneurship and you can afford it, I highly recommend it. Now is the time in your lives to do it. I think it's wonderful. And go start a company, go join a startup. There's hundreds and thousands of amazing things happening around you. So just jump right in.
I think that's such a good point. Being an entrepreneur myself now is my 2nd or 3rd career along the way. I live this every day in an early stage company, and I come from Wall Street. That job that I used to have on Wall Street was so easy compared to this. And I've been on both sides of the table here. And I have to say, because in a lot of traditional businesses or corporate America, you show up, you know what your job is, you perform your job and you get paid, and it's very clear. You just have to focus on doing your job well. When you're in a company, you have to figure out where the company is going along with performing in your job, which is really hard. And there is no clear path. And for any of you who are thinking about founding a company, if you have that burning idea, go do it. But if you don't have the burning idea and you think, gee, I'd like to actually try that, go work in an early stage company. You do not have to be the founder. And there's so much that you learn just being in the environment of early stage companies and how fast they move and how the decision making occurs. And, you know, at this point in time, you're probably all going to have numerous careers and stops along the way. So you may go into entrepreneurship, you may go into venture capital, you may, you know, do a bit of all of that. So the final thing I'd like to say is just from the investor's point of view, and I'd love if you have any further comments on this, but when I meet entrepreneurs, to me, the number one thing I look for is, do they see something that I don't see? Do they have a vision of that sector, that there's an opening, that there's a white spot, and they're going to get there? And I think that's really important, because the biggest companies, the best companies, the biggest breakthroughs occur when it's something brand new. It's not just another company that does X. And so, you know, think about, everyone in this room has an insight about something in some industry, in some piece of their life. And that is usually the basis for saying, I'm either going to invest in that or found a company. So any last words? Or
we're hiring.
You're hiring.
Work for Zola and work for Maven and apply to Techstars. And then when you're ready for seed funding, call first round.
Yes, and if you've never invested before, come to Plum Alley and we'll team up with first round. So you got it all covered right here. All right, thank you very much.